this border war. Fans called it Moonshine Throwdown. I think that's the best rivalry name, an unofficial name, but the best rivalry name I've come across.
Yeah, unofficial that should become official soon enough.
Embrace it.
5 receivers at Duncan's disposal. Duncan stepping up. Hit! Ball is loose!
Big call here.
Marshall thinks they have it, and the Herd do!
Here's the kickoff from Amaretto Curry to the Hilltoppers, and we are underway, and a fake reverse on the kick return. And here comes Townsend down the left sideline. What a way to start it for Western Kentucky on the road, and it is an opening touchdown return, and just like that, the Hilltoppers strike first.
Justin Rohrwasser to try to win it for Marshall from 53 yards out. It's got the leg. It is good! And the perfect season continues for Justin Rohrwasser.
Goes for 2. Going for the win. Western Kentucky going for the victory. Rolling to his right, quick strike, and they did it! Western Kentucky has ended the perfect season into the hands of Willie McNeil. A shocker here in West Virginia, and it is over for Marshall. They end the regular season 11-1.
Welcome back to the Moonshine Throwdown podcast. It's an early week recap / preview episode once again, Sunday afternoon. Trace and I are together again to, well, let's relive what happened in Boca Raton last night. We'll talk about now that it's 75 week and UAB is coming to town on the second half of this episode. But hey, it was kind of, what do you want to say? Rinse and repeat. Marshall and FAU. There are some people that have some feelings about this game, and you know, whatever those feelings are, it is what it is. I think at this point it just becomes dead air, really, to just keep talking about what some folks want to force. It's funny to me that earlier last week somebody mentioned, you know, because all this realignment stuff is swirling around, and the news that everybody's waiting to hear is Western Kentucky and Middle Tennessee, will they go to the MAC? And what I got on my timeline was somebody making the comment that the Moonshine Throwdown was a forced rivalry. And that to me was funny because, you know, we didn't force anything. The games play out the way they played out, and we've just kind of captured this opportunity to build something on social media. It was very organic in its growth. You know, fans just kind of latched on and had a good time. Completely not what happens when you talk about Marshall and FAU. Yet some folks in Southern Florida want to keep beating the drum that this is a rivalry. So, I mean, 8-1 is not a rivalry. Okay, now 7-1 wasn't. 8-1 is definitely not. So just because you want it to be that way doesn't necessarily make it so. So to that end, let's talk about FAU and the game that Marshall posted last night. Early on, Trace, it wasn't the most smoothest of games for the Herd. Rough early on. They kind of needed to get settled down and settled in, but once they did, it was kind of business as usual, if you want to call it that, for Marshall. They handled their business. They limited the big plays, and you know, they did what they had to do to win. And ultimately, at the final whistle, it's 28-13 in favor of the Herd. And once the Herd kind of got a lead, it really didn't feel like the game was in question. And I hate to skip ahead, but what really cemented it for me was the touchdown to close out the half, essentially, for Marshall, the first half. Rasheen Ali gets in just before halftime. And I thought, okay, well, FAU can't seem to get it going. Whatever is going on just isn't working. Like, they were dropping touchdown passes. I mean, it just wasn't working. It wasn't their night. So for whatever you want to call it, it was just a regular Conference USA East Division game, just like it always has been. Now Marshall is in control of their own destiny, much as Western Kentucky. So it makes the final game of the season become a little bit more pivotal, is the word I used earlier on Twitter. There's a lot of football to be played. Many things can happen, but as of right now, the Moonshine Throwdown looks like it can and will settle the Conference USA East Division. But let's talk about the game before we get into your grades. Remember, we're going to try to do this in a more streamlined fashion. Overall, those indicators, Trace, yardage, time of possession, first downs, turnovers, basically even. So you would think that you might have a little bit of a closer game, but it didn't work out that way on the scoreboard. Marshall gets the edge in total yardage, 447 to FAU's 441. Time of possession, FAU gets the edge, 30 minutes, 19 seconds to 29 minutes, 41 seconds for the Herd. So very, very similar there. First downs, 21 to 20 in favor of FAU, and turnovers are a push. Each team gets one. That I mentioned before that now FAU is 1-8 all time against Marshall. And remember that lone win was back in something like 2017, and it was a 5-point win in a game that then quarterback Chase Litton threw 4 interceptions. So basically Marshall handed them the game then as well, but whatever. Marshall is now 6-3 on the season, 4-1 in conference, tied for first in the Conference USA East Division, and slipping through the cracks mostly is that Marshall's now bowl eligible in Charles Huff's first season. So the funny thing about that is, I've seen a lot around the social media Twitterverse that there are 2 teams that are moving out of Conference USA that have never been to the Bahamas Bowl, and that's Marshall and FAU. And hey, Marshall got the win, so you can send the Owls down to the Bahamas. I think that should be your consolation prize for losing this game. Grant Wells, pretty good day. Started out a little rough. Not going to lie, I was a little worried. There were some bad reads, some iffy decisions. He was back to throwing the fastballs from 5 yards away and stuff like that. Just kind of got you a little on edge to start the game, but man, he really settled in and ended up having a really good day. 26 of 38 on the day, 351 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, quarterback rating of 57.1. Rasheen Ali does what Rasheen Ali does, 18 carries, 90 yards, 2 touchdowns on the ground, bringing him to 19 on the season. Total touchdowns, that is. 19 total touchdowns on the season. Getting eerily close to that single-season touchdown mark of one Randy Moss from yesteryear. 29 is the record. If Marshall can make it to a Conference USA title game, that would give him 5 games to get 11 touchdowns to break that. If Marshall doesn't make it to the Conference USA title game, that gives him 4 games to get to 11 more touchdowns to break that record. It's in striking distance, but it's still going to take some
doing
work. Let's put it that way. It's in striking distance. Willie Johnson, you called it a couple of weeks ago, and man, if you just didn't miss it by, a week or two, Willie Johnson, big career day through the air, 5 catches, 140 yards is a career high for Willie, 1 touchdown through the air. Rasheen Ali also chipping in on the receiving side, 6 catches for 70 yards. Corey Gamage, 5 catches, 51 yards, still without a receiving touchdown on the season. Mind-blowing at this point.
9 games.
All in all, Herd offense racked up 447 yards, like I said, and they got 21 points on offense. Of course, the Herd scored 28. We'll get to that later in the episode. Defensively, it's Abraham Beauplan through leading the Herd in tackles, 10 tackles, 2 solo, and a half a tackle for loss. I got to be honest with you. That is about the quietest 10-tackle performance that I can remember. I mean, I heard his name called on a couple of times, but it just seemed like it was a team effort that nobody was like leaping out to you. So that was a really quiet 10-tackle performance by Beauplan. So good effort individually, but man, it was usually when somebody reaches the 10-tackle milestone, you're like, man, that guy's everywhere. And obviously he was everywhere. It just didn't feel like it. Eli Neal, 9 tackles, 5 solo. Brandon Drayton, 8 tackles, 6 solo. Owen Porter and Kobe Kimberlander both end up with a sack and a half apiece. Corey McCoy gets a big, huge forced fumble that stalls a FAU drive that was most certainly headed for some form of points. So very momentum-killing drive play made by Corey McCoy. Her defense as a whole, 6 sacks as a team, 8 tackles for loss, and that forced fumble. Special teams, though, Trace, holy moly.
Yeah.
It doesn't get much better than the opening kickoff. Kick return, Jaden Harrison takes the opening kickoff back for the Herd, 99 yards for the touchdown. Then they kick it to him one more time, and he takes it out to midfield. And after that, it was high pop-up, short kick to the up man. And punt returns, Willie Johnson just had one, but it was a 27-yard return that got back to midfield as well right before the half. That ended up being that Rasheen Ali touchdown that I mentioned that I thought was very, very pivotal in projecting the Herd or propelling the Herd to a victory in this game. Shane Chuchi 0 of 1 on field goals and 4 of 4 on extra points. Pretty good day all around for this Herd team. We talked a few weeks ago, Trace, that the FIU game might have been the most complete game that this Herd team has posted. But really, back-to-back now, FIU, really solid all-around team performances in all three phases. And I know we'll talk about that fake punt, field goal, whatever that was. It was a fake field goal, I think, that ended up drawing FAU offsides to extend the drive. Ultimately didn't lead any points for the Herd. But, man, what a play call. It worked beautifully. Just a great all-around performance. So give me some thoughts on the game, and then I'm going to go right into your grade.
Yeah, this is probably the first time that I've ever been on a wrap-up on this podcast for Marshall where I didn't watch a single second of the game. And I was at a concert last night, and the concert started at 7, so I just had to keep up with it on my phone. And I just kept checking periodically whenever my service would allow me to. And it was 10-7 FAU the first time I checked. Then Marshall was up 14-13. Then it was 21-13, and then it was 28. And I'm like, okay, we might have it, and we might have a pretty good game going now. But I tried, I looked at all the stats and all the numbers and tried to watch some of the stuff, and it really seemed like a really good, complete game. And, they needed a game like that, especially against a quality opponent. It's one thing to do it to FIU or North Texas. It's another thing to do it to a team that was tied for first in the East Division, that's American Athletic Conference bound, more power to them. So, that's a good win. I mean, it really is. And I'll tell you one thing. Marshall sure does a lot of winning in paradise. I'll just tell you. I mean, they win in paradise a whole lot. So,
that's a nice vacation home for the Herd, isn't it? They go down 1 week every 2 years and kind of live it up in paradise and come back with a dub.
Somebody ought to change the Wikipedia page for FAU to the owner being Marshall, because that's about what it is. And but no, it seemed like a great game overall. I wanna try to go back and watch as much of it as I can, but with being on Facebook, I don't know if I'll be able to or not, but I want to at least watch some highlights. But really good game, really big. I think, like you said, pivotal is the right word, because it sets them up for 3 big games coming up. They control their own destiny. And I think that, obviously, if they beat Western Kentucky, as long as they don't lose to UAB and Charlotte, if they lose, if they just beat Western Kentucky and lose, they can afford to lose one of those other 2 games. So, they have a pretty decent position right now, to chance to win the East. But obviously, winning out would solve everything. But if they can beat Western in the last game, plus split one of the next 2, if not, of course, win both, then they're sitting pretty. But there's a lot of work to be done before they get to that point.
Yeah, there is a lot of work to be done. But look, if you go back and you watch that game, you'll see what I was saying when it was a rough start. Her defense was getting gashed with big run plays. Johnny Ford was running. Wow, it looked scary for a little bit. They just could not seem to get him down. He was squirting through the pile when you think, okay, this guy's down, and then all of a sudden, bloop, out the other side of the pile he goes, and there he goes, darting down the field. So it was a little worrisome. But the Herd settled in, and really after that big turnover, the forced fumble, it really wasn't the same attack. It wasn't. They had plays there. They had open touchdown, long plays there that were dropped. 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 Not defended well or whatever, dropped. And that's got to be frustrating. It has to be frustrating. So the game was there for them to be a little bit more competitive in. They just didn't make the plays. Marshall did make the plays. So that's your difference. So, look, let's talk about some grades. Grant Wells, I mentioned 26-38, another 350 yards, 1 touchdown. Really, the poor decision was early on, and it was down in the red zone. And that's another thing where, really, this is how we're going to start out? It was a bad decision, and it bit him. So, but that was it. Great game after that. Really a great game after that.
Yeah, I gave Grant Wells a B+ because, I mean, like you said, it looked like it seems like he had a really good game numbers wise to kind of back that up. 26 out of 38. I mean, that's a good completion percentage right there. 351. I mean, anytime you can get 350 yards passing, that's nothing to sneeze at ever. But like the whole year, essentially, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. It just gets so old to see the 1 interception every game. I mean, it's 11-11 on the year. I mean, that just, I just don't think that trend can continue if Marshall wants to compete for a championship or win a title. That trend cannot continue. And we'll get into more of that later, I'm sure. But 57.1 QBR, that seemed a little low, but I guess the interception has to take a lot into account of that. But he had a good game numbers-wise. I mean, you would have liked to have seen more, maybe a couple more touchdowns or no picks. But other than that, though, I mean, if he can just stop throwing to the other team and, the decision-making can improve a little bit, he could be really dangerous. But I'll give him a B+ just because, he did have a lot of good numbers besides the pick.
It's a fair grade. It really is, because he really settled in after that interception. And I think a lot of the Herd fan base was like, okay, let's see how Wells bounces back. Let's see how he plays the remaining 50 minutes of this game, and he played it pretty daggone well. He was making the good throws. There was, there's always a time or two where you're like, wow, man, you hit you decided to throw to the read that was in triple coverage instead of the guy that was maybe one-on-one, but still, it didn't come back to bite him. Offensively as a whole, the Herd racks up nearly 450 yards of offense. They get 21 of their 28 on offense. What do you got for this Herd offense as a whole?
Yeah, offense, I gave it B+ as well. I thought they looked really good. 28 points, all those 7 of those weren't for them, but still, 447 total yards is a good day. Really, most of that was through the air. I mean, 351 through the air out of 447. I mean, they ran the ball. Rasheen Ali had a good game, but they didn't lean on the run that heavily. They definitely leaned on the run much heavier against FIU. There's no doubt about that. They were 4 of 14 on third down, which is pretty low. You'd like to see that better because they had been doing pretty good job on third down. They had been around 50% in recent weeks, but this one not really close to that. The one turnover, like you said, Grant Wells, it's just a bad habit at this point, I think. They had some big chunk plays. The long Willie Johnson touchdown pass was huge. Rasheen Ali had a nice, pretty long touchdown run, so you like to see that. 7 penalties, though. I mean, not all those on the offense, but 7 penalties is a little bit much there. They had the week before they only had 2 penalties, or 2 or 3 the week before, so they had done a really great job, but they kind of regressed a little bit there. My friend that we just did a podcast with last week, he texted me and said that getting Ali involved through the passing game is very essential to the offense because it's space, getting him out in space like that, and he's a mismatch in that type of atmosphere and environment. So hopefully they can do that more often, get him involved in the passing game a little more. But offense, I'll give him a B+.
Yeah, it was good. And see Ali get involved in the passing. He converted some third downs for them, or he made just an outlet pass turn into something bigger. That safety valve pass, like, well, let me get something. Well, hell, he turns it upfield and goes 20 yards with it. You know what I mean? It was a nice little change of pace. You mentioned the penalties. There were just a couple, and very, very uncharacteristic from offensive lineman Will Orm. Will's a great one. I mean, he's great. Mm-hmm. But he got called for this ticky-tack chop block or something like. I mean, it was away from the play. Really, the guy that got blocked was, not going to make a play on Ali, and it ended up being a 75-yard touchdown run that got called back. And it was very, very ticky-tack, but a penalty nonetheless. And then later on in the game, Will was called for like a unsportsmanlike conduct or something like that. I don't know what it was, but that was 2 big ones, and it's very uncharacteristic from Will. And I know that he'll shake that off and come back even better this week against UAB because he's a great one, and all the great ones shake it off and, fight another day. Defensively, the Herd did a lot positively. I mean, 6 times they got to what's the quarterback's name? I forgot. Perry, right?
Perry,
yeah. I forgot his name. I was about to say Posey. 6 times they got to Perry. They were in on some good, solid pass defense as well. There were a few blown plays that luckily the FAU receivers just dropped those long passes. Never got any update on Stephen Gilmore after he left the game and went to the medical tent. So hopefully he's okay, but still the Herd hung tough and was able to make the plays that they needed to get a win in this game. 441 yards is not something that you like, and early on it looked like it was going to be another, oh man, the Herd's going to give up a huge run day to a running back. Well, they did early anyway. I think Ford ended up with like 130 yards or something like that, and most of them came super early. But anyway, what do you got for the defense?
Yeah, I give the defense an A-. I mean, really good day from them outside of the run defense, which has been a struggle all year. But, only giving up 13 points, coming up with some big timely stops was important. 441 total yards allowed, like you said. Yeah, it's a little high, but when you give up most of them on the ground, I mean, they gave up less than 200 yards passing, so they did a really good job against Perry for the most part. But 243 giving up on the ground is just, unfortunately, a bad reoccurring theme this year. But hopefully they can figure something out there in the next 3 games. I don't know. They did get the 1 turnover, which was big. 6 sacks, like you said, that's really good. 8 TFLs, 3 quarterback hurries. And, they came up with some timely stops, sniffing out or, shutting down some of them drives and forcing them to kick field goals and that sort of thing. So it was a good game from the defense. They did a lot of good things. It looked like would really like to see the run defense shirt up a little better. I mean, especially, like I said a while back, if they get to a conference title game and they got to go against UTSA, they might need 15 players on defense to stop that running game. So they're going to have to figure something out. But defense in this game was really good overall, besides run defense, basically. So give them an A-.
Yeah, and I don't want to say that the run defense was terrible for the whole game. It was just suspect early. They really did get it. They did get it right for the latter 2/3 of that game. They were pretty good. How about special teams, though, man? Coming out like gangbusters. Usually we're just talking about, well, everybody did their job and it was no big deal, and that's about all you can ask for on special teams. And here the Herd comes out, takes the opening kickoff back. The next kick return is a huge one to midfield, and you get 1 punt return, and you really make it count. That sets up a touchdown right before the half. What about this special teams unit?
It's got to be an A+. It's got to be the best special teams performance of the year, bar none. They had a really good one last week against FIU, an A caliber performance. This is an A+, in my opinion. I mean, when you start the game off with a kickoff return for a touchdown, 99 yards, you talk about setting the tone. That's setting the tone in the biggest way you could possibly set it. So, amazing start there. Like you said, the Willie Johnson 27-yard punt return. He had a really long one last week against FIU too, that he nearly took back to the house. So he's really starting to catch on with the punt return game. 0-1 on field goals, which I think that said that was Sanders that kicked that field goal but I'm not sure on that. But either way, 0-1 on field goals, 4-4 on extra points. Lefevre had 39 yards per punt, so that was pretty good. I mean, didn't have to do it too much, and it seemed like they just totally controlled the game on special teams. I mean, anytime you get those huge plays like that, it's going to give you a high grade, and there's just no doubt an A+ day.
Yeah, it was, and I know that's the ESPN app that's telling you that it was Sanders that kicked that field goal, but it was 100% not.
No.
Yeah, I was watching the game. It was Chuchi, and it was an unfortunate miss because at that point, if he makes that, it ultimately doesn't matter. But if he makes that, it pushes it to 18, and now you're looking at a 3-score game. Okay. So that's really the only reason that kind of was, really would have liked to have had that one because it really would have put the game out of reach, basically. But it ultimately did not matter. So, but overall, man, what a great game. Now, let's think about this. Last week against FIU, now Marshall blocks a field goal, calls timeout, and ices himself, and then blocks a field goal again.
Yeah.
So then you think all the way back to week 1 and what this special teams unit did against Navy. So they're really making some serious plays. And, oh, by the way, we're looking at about the time we all thought that Talik Keaton was going to be re-entering the lineup for the Herd.
Yeah.
We all kind of had 75 weeks circled around our calendar thinking that might be it. This is around the 6-week mark. Haven't heard anything about that. But think about getting a weapon like Talik Keaton back in the mix with the rest of these receivers, taking this offense up a notch, taking the special teams up a notch. I mean, this could be, hitting its stride at the right time for the Herd. Coaching, what do you got for the coaching staff against FAU?
Yeah, I mean, I gave them an A. I mean, it was a very good performance. They did a great job for the most part. Came out a little bit rusty. Well, not the kickoff, but they came out, like you said, a little bit rusty. Gave up some yards there. Let FAU score 10 points in the first quarter. But after that, held them to 3 points the rest of the game. I mean, that's very impressive. Offense did some good things. Grant Wells was able to sling it around pretty well. They got Rasheen Ali involved in the passing game, which we've said a couple times already. It was very crucial. And I think that that's going to change the dynamic of the offense if he is involved in the passing game more often. So hopefully that's a sign of things to come. He's just a mismatch. There's just very few guys that he's going to go against that actually know how to stop him. So if they can get him in space with the ball in his hands, I like all these chances 9 out of 10 times, or even better than that. So, coaching did a really good job. A tough place to go to win because FAU had won the last 12. I think they had a 12-game home winning streak at that point. But like I said, Marshall loves winning in paradise, so they did what they did, and the coaching deserves a lot of credit for that. So gotta give them an A.
I'm not gonna I didn't go back and check when was the last loss, but right around 12 games at home seems like it would have been losing to Marshall the time before.
Right.
So if Marshall, they go on a winning streak between Marshall losses, then it is what it is. Look, aside from the X's and O's and the game planning and all that kind of stuff, how about just the pure raw emotion shown by Charles Huff on that fake special teams play? I mean, he was elated to see that worked. The smile went from ear to ear. And I had a buddy text me that was watching along, of course, on the game. And he was telling me, he was like, man, I love Huff. And he doesn't usually he's not that kind of guy that, gets caught up in, what the coach does from week to week or what the team does from play to play. Yeah. And so it was kind of surprising to get that. So I thought, wow, if you can bring this dude around a little bit, you must be doing something right. And you gotta love, what a breath of fresh air. I mean, the pills to call something like that is amazing, and it worked. So kudos to Charles Huff. Kudos to all those guys. Every single one of those assistants. I know for some of them who have spent time on an FAU staff, that right. They probably did have this one circled on their calendar a little bit. They did want to get this one. And they had their particular units ready for the task. So good job overall for sure. Speaking of overall, what do you got as a whole team effort for this herd against the FAU?
Overall, I'll give them an A. I mean, I thought it was a very good performance. I almost wrote down an A-, but then I thought, I think it's more of an A. I mean, when you go on the road to beat a quality team by 15 points, on their home field with a 12-game home winning streak, that's impressive. And it was a battle of two teams that had the exact same overall record and conference record, and they were tied for first in the East. So this wasn't just some piddly game against, Rice or, somebody that's just a low, FIU or somebody. This was a game that mattered. This was a game that's going to really – I mean, if FAU manages to, win out this year, it could all be for naught because of this game right here. So, this was a big game, and one of the team that emerged victorious from this game was going to have a lot going in their favor heading into the last 3 games of the year, having a chance to win the division. And Marshall, fortunately, came out on top, and it sets up some pretty big games coming up, especially the one we got next week, which get into that eventually. But this was a very good performance, very good win for the herd. So got to give them an A.
Absolutely. I'm not going to downplay and be that guy that's just like, well, FAU's a terrible team and this doesn't really. They're a good team. They're at the top of the Conference USA East for a reason. They were in contention for a reason. Is that they're better than most of the other teams in this division. Now, that being said, FAU does have the easiest path for the last 3 games of the year. Outside of Western Kentucky, their final 2 games are Old Dominion and Middle Tennessee. Right. So they have the easier final portion of the schedule. So getting this game over them is going to be big. I don't think they're going to have to go to Bowling Green and play Western Kentucky. You cannot like your chances against the Hilltoppers. They are cruising on offense right now. And if 28 points can beat you, then 48 points can definitely be.
Yeah.
And that's more like the Western Kentucky speed. Great overall game. The Herd is now 6-3, 4-1 in conference, setting atop the Conference USA East with Western Kentucky. Moonshine Throwdown's looking like it's going to be a really, really good one. Could come down for everything in the East. So we'll see how it all plays out, but hang with us on the other side of this break. It's 75-week, Trace, and UAB is coming to town in a rematch of the 2020 Conference USA Championship game. Hang with us. It's the Moonshine Throwdown Podcast.
Jaden Harrison back deep to receive the opening kickoff, gets it at about the 1-yard line and takes it down the right side of the field across the 20. They can get explosive plays across the 40, across midfield. He's off to the races. It's going to be a touchdown. The Thundering Herd kicking things off with an opening drive touchdown.
Trace, it's 75 week this week at Marshall, and I don't think we have to explain what that means to anybody that wears the Kelly green and white. But this is undoubtedly a week unlike any other in Huntington, West Virginia. We've documented it over the years on this podcast that you absolutely, historically, do not want to be the team that draws Marshall on this week, because inevitably there will be some kind of play or plays that happen in this game that always seem to propel Marshall to a convincing victory. And I'm not talking about the refs giving them a call. I'm talking about that weird play, the bad snap on a punt that ends up getting downed at the half-yard line, or the punt return for touchdown, or whatever the case may be. There's always something that's out of the ordinary for the Herd anyway that seemingly gives them an edge in this game. And unfortunately, UAB draws the Herd on the schedule this year. UAB also 6-3 and 4-1 in the conference, setting in solid second place in the Conference USA West Division behind, of course, undefeated UTSA. We're recording so early in the week that we don't have a line on this game. It'll probably come out tomorrow or maybe even later today. I don't know. But Power Index is out, Trace, and surprisingly, Marshall has a 68.4% chance to win according to the ESPN Power Index. A little bit higher than I thought it was going to be. Yeah. I thought this would be closer to a coin flip type game, but hey, I think you'll take it. The game, of course, is going down this Saturday, 11/13, 3:30 p.m. Eastern on CBS Sports Network. So Marshall's 75-week game will be broadcast on an actual network, not on Facebook. What? All time, the Herd owns an 8-3 advantage over UAB, but UAB, of course, got the last one in 2020, which was, of course, the Conference USA title game that Marshall lost for the first time ever. No, not ever. Yeah, they lost the first time ever on their home field in the Conference USA era, I should say. Let's think back. One note I want to make about that game versus this season, let's call it. And that is stemming around Grant Wells. And we're talking about the yin and yang a couple of weeks ago when he had that game at North Texas. The game against UAB was the one he did not have a completion in the entire first half of the game. Right. And then earlier this season, he sets the record for consecutive completions in a game. The dichotomy, the dynamic, I don't know what you call it here, but the hot and cold nature of this quarterback for the Herd is, man, it's something. I mean, it is staggering. So we're going to have something along the middle of the road there. You don't have to throw for 18 straight completions, but you damn sure can't get 0 in the first half of the game and expect to be competitive. So, Trace, UAB is coming to town at 75-week. Thoughts on the game initially?
Oh, it's a big one. That's one thing you got to get out of the way real quick. It's a big one. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're playing UAB, if you're playing Alabama, if you're playing Hergen High School. If you're on this weekend, 75 week, it doesn't matter. It's a big game. And it really, especially is big this year because, they got a quality team coming in. And, this is the team that beat Marshall on its home field last year for a championship. So, the players and the coach, well, one coach, but everybody involved with the program that was here last year, remember that. And they're going to want revenge and get that sour taste out of their mouths from last year. And, it just the incentive of this game is absolutely massive for Marshall. I mean, they want to win it for a number of reasons. Number one being obvious reasons, but this is a huge game. I mean, UAB came in last year. You know, they took it to Marshall. I mean, it was a close game, but like they ran the ball very well. They out-physicaled Marshall. They kind of beat Marshall at their own game, and you know that I know that that's something that they're going to want to fix this year. And this is cool. It's cool to have, you know, that Marshall hasn't even played UAB in the regular season like in a long time. So it's cool to have that back. You know, not going to have very many chances to play them anymore, but it's a big one. I know that I remember I seen a tweet recently that Doug Chapman tweeted and said he can't wait until they have black helmets and whatever. I don't know if that's like a teaser or if that's like something he's just genuinely saying, but like, who knows? If they broke out black helmets in this game, heard by 100. That's all I'm saying. Heard by 100.
Well, I wasn't expecting that to come out in your initial thoughts. I actually had that in my notes to bring up kind of at the end of this, but I was thinking about that as well. But look, let's think back to that 2020 matchup. We said going in that this was going to be a battle of two running backs, and it should be. Brendan Knox and what was it, Spencer Brown, I think is who it was.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what UAB did. They played that game, and it worked. And every time Marshall would creep up to try to stop that run game, they would hit something over the top. And Marshall kept trying to get Wells going, and he didn't complete a pass in the whole first half. Instead of going, you know what, it's not working right now. Let's rely on our very capable and very reliable workhorse running back and all-timer in Brendan Knox and this BC offensive line. They didn't do that. It was like screen pass, run, punt. And had they done anything differently, they had a real chance to win that game, even despite UAB controlling the clock for like 40 minutes in that game. So I think if you're Tim Cramsey, you kind of better learn from that. You know, like you've got another really good offensive line. You've got another really good running back. Now, Grant Wells is doing much better this year, but still, if it's not clicking early on, are you still going to keep trying to like pound that nail? Or are you going to go, you know what, let me put it in the gut of Ali for a little bit. Let's let this offense pick up a few first downs. Let me try some dump offs maybe to Xavier Gaines, whatever you need to do. But it's not, this cannot be that 15 play calls are 40-yard passes down the field. It can't be that. It cannot be that. So I'm not here to say what it has to be. I'm just saying it can't be that because that is so low percentage. You know, you just can't do that. You got to go with your strengths in this game, and Marshall's strengths have been the catch and long run, right? The Willie Johnson pass, and then he streaks for 40 yards, that type of thing. Let's talk about some players to look out for UAB. Dylan Hawkins, quarterback, 93 of 152 on the season, 1,473 yards, 11 touchdowns, just 4 interceptions. But he has been sacked 19 times. So if you're a herd defensive lineman or linebacker, you'd love to see that. Running back, Dwayne Mcbride. He was very productive last year, pretty damn productive this year. 120 carries on the year, 837 yards, and 8 touchdowns on the ground. But hold your horses real quick, Trace, because last week, just yesterday, against Louisiana Tech, Mcbride went for 210 yards and 4 touchdowns.
Oh boy!
So a quarter of his yardage and half of his touchdowns came last week or yesterday against Louisiana Tech. Marshall's had a penchant for giving up big yardage and big runs to featured backs this year, and McBride brings just the next challenge in a long season of challenges for this herd defense. They can't afford to let him have a fast start like they did FAU. Also, running back Jermaine Brown Jr., 88 carries, 452 yards, and 4 touchdowns on the ground. UAB's leading receiver is tight end Garrett Prince. How about that? 21 catches leads the team. 471 yards leads the team. Good for 22.4 yards per catch, which is second on the team. And he has 7 touchdowns through the air, which leads the team. Wide receiver Trey Shropshire. That's a tough name to say. Shropshire.
He killed him last year, too.
Yeah, 19 catches, 440 yards, 23.2 yards per catch, which does lead the team, and 4 touchdown receptions. Yeah, he's the one that they hit over the top late in the game on a busted coverage in that Conference USA championship game where Stephen Gilmore and Drake Pitts just kind of got mixed up on the coverage, and the next thing you know, Shropshire's headed for the end zone. Kind of put that game out of reach. All in all, that UAB offense is gaining 386 yards total offense per game, 209 through the air and 177 on the ground, so they're fairly balanced. They're scoring 28.8 points per game, and Marshall's only allowing 19 points per game. Something's got to give here. Defensively for the Blazers, it's linebacker Noah Wilder leading the way. 57 total tackles leads the team, 24 solo and an interception. Defensive lineman Antonio Moultrie might be the most dangerous guy you want to keep an eye on, just because he's in that first level and he's so productive. 42 total tackles, 14 of those solo and 2 sacks with a fumble recovery. And safety Will Bowler, 37 tackles, 19 solo, 1 pass defended and a fumble recovery. All in all, this UAB defense is allowing 326 yards per game, 208 through the air and 118 on the ground, only giving up 22.3 points per game, but Marshall's scoring 36. Again, something has got to give. Now, more recently, Marshall's been more in that 24 to 28 point range, but still, I think they're a better offense. Even though they're scoring fewer points, they look to be a more efficient offense right now. Impact plays for this defense for UAB, 22 total team sacks, 8 interceptions, 6 forced fumbles, and 7 fumble recoveries. So they're doing pretty well. Trace, based on everything we've said, what we know about these two teams, and the fact that it's 75 week, what do you got for your keys to victory for the Herd in this game?
Yeah, first thing I have written down, I put, and I kind of subtly alluded to this earlier, I put control of the line of scrimmage, because UAB is a physical team. There's no doubt that's the Bill Clark, that's his method, the physicality, the running backs. I mean, you mentioned 2 running backs that are having good years, that have good stats. I mean, that's what they want to do. That's what they did last year against Marshall in the title game, is they ran the ball down their throat. And, that hadn't happened to Marshall all the whole year up until that point. So UAB really did a good job with that. And I think Marshall has to control the line of scrimmage. They have to win both sides of the ball. Their offensive line's got to move bodies to get Ollie some running lanes and Evans. And then Marshall's D-line has to move some bodies, get to the quarterback, slow down their running game, because Marshall has been absolutely gashed on the ground a lot this year. And, they can't allow UAB to go out there and run for 300 yards. It's just not going to – you're not going to have a chance, I don't think, to win the game that way. So they have to win the line of scrimmage, control the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. That's my first thing I wrote down. Next point is 0 turnovers from Grant Wells. 0 turnovers. I mean, it's got to stop. I mean, he's got the numbers and the yards, the completions, the completion percentage, but his touchdown to interception ratio is very average. Very average. Actually, you could say it flat out sucks. I mean, 11 and 11 is not. That's not. If you saw that right now through 9 games, you would think Marshall's maybe like a 500 team with that, but they're not. And he has to protect the football. No forcing throws into double coverage. No, all misreads. Just poor decision making. It's gotta stop. He hasn't had a game this year where he's had 3 or 4 touchdowns and no picks. He has not had a game this year like that. He needs to have one of those games. And I mean, it's going to be a tall task to do it against UAB, but he has to protect the football. He can't have any turnovers. I mean, it's just got to stop. So that one I think is big. Next point is, I think you got to control your emotions a little bit. I mean, they're going to come out and play with a different level of energy, a different level of emotion. It's for obvious reasons. I mean, they're playing for much, much more than themselves this week. And, sometimes it's hard to kind of harness that energy or that emotion in a little bit. And sometimes, it could lead to a little bit of extracurriculars after the play and, playing a little too hard after the whistle and getting some, silly penalties. So stuff like that, they're going to have to harness the emotion, and I think that they'll be fine. They always seem to do a great job of that for the most part. But in this game where UAB, you don't want to give UAB very many chances, extra chances, and, just give them free stuff. So you got to control your emotions, use your emotion wisely, essentially is what I'm trying to say. My last point is you got to continue the strong special teams play. The last 2 weeks, special teams have been lights out great. You got to do that again this week. I think it's going to be a very underrated factor of the game. And that's a big reason why Marshall has won the last 2 games. And that is arguably maybe not the biggest reason, but one of the very biggest reasons that they beat FAU was because of the special teams. So they need to have another great special teams day, good punting, field goal kicking, kickoffs, no kickoffs out of bounds, get Willie Johnson involved in the punt return game, get the kick return game going again. I mean, you got to have a sound overall special teams day. I think that would be a big key to them getting the win here.
Excellent points. And I would like to add that I'm not trying to put this on a sour note, but this is the point in the season last year where we saw it start to come off the rails for the Herd.
Yeah.
The final 3 games of the year or whatever. Now, granted, it was a regular season game, a conference title game, and a bowl game where it kind of went off the rails. So there's really 4 to 5 games left here, depending on how things shake out. But still, you are now 9 games into the season. There's really not any room for, we've got to get that cleaned up. At this point, It has to be cleaned up. You are who you are right now. You're 9 games into the season. You are who you are. Points are going to be at a premium for every game in this final stretch. You're going to have every one. And if you have to settle for field goals, then you have to hit those field goals. Yep. Every point is going to matter. So to that end, my keys to victory are number 1, first and foremost, Marshall will have to have sound assignment football and more sure tackling. They have done a terrible job early in games of wrapping up tackling and getting dudes actually on the ground. You can't just lay a shoulder into somebody and think they're going to fall down. I mean, let's textbook some tackling here and set the tone early, right? Nothing extra, nothing easy, none of that kind of stuff. Like, we're going to hit you and you're going to go down, and that's it. Number 2, I think you got to let Rasheen Ali just run. I mean, he's proven that he can take over a game. If Marshall can commit to letting him do that, he's shown that he can do that, and he can win a ball game for you if Grant Wells has a ho-hum average day. Rasheen Ali can win a game for you. You mentioned if you look at his stats, if you look at Wells' stats and you see 11 touchdowns to 11 interceptions, you would think Marshall is a 500 team. Well, if you don't have a running back who's leading the nation in touchdowns, they very well could be a 500 team. So you have this huge asset that's also in the backfield with you. Use him, right? Use him. So what I made this point on Twitter as well, and I said this, and I love it because I kept hearing the Facebook announcer say that Rasheen Ali runs with bad intentions. And if that's not one of the coolest nicknames I've ever heard, I said that on Twitter. I'm all in on that. I'm like, Rasheen Bad Intentions Ali needs to get the ball 15 to 20 times a game and let him do what he does. I am all in on Bad Intentions. Number 3, you said it. I agree. You can't force anything, right? If 5 yards is there, take the 5 yards. I mean, if 12 yards is there, take the 12 yards. There was one play in particular yesterday, and I'm not trying to pick on Grant Wells, but they showed a replay of a outlet pass that he threw, and I think it was to Xavier Gaines maybe, and it went for like 2 or 3 yards. And, from the sideline view, it was like, oh, okay, no big deal. Well, they showed the replay, and it was from like behind the quarterback view. And you watch the release that Shadid Ahmed gets from the midfield, and he hooks out, and he's wide open. I mean, wide open. But Wells is looking this way. If he's looking this way, he sees Ahmed, and that dude is still running. I mean, still, right now, some 12 hours later, he's still running. That's how open he was. So I'm not trying to pick on him, but, let's not be so quick to go, okay, this play is designed to go to my first read, Gaines, he's open, I'm going to throw. He still may be open another second and a half later, but also this guy might be open 40 yards downfield. So, just take what's there. Number 4, I think you've got to harness that environment. You talked about playing with a different type of emotion. This is a unique environment that Marshall's going to be in, and it's one that by and large is a huge benefit to them. These guys are going to be jacked up and jazzed up and ready to roll. They are going to have all of the juice, right?
Yep.
And if they can harness that properly, if this coaching staff, which, yes, Tim Cramsey is the lone holdover, but let's not forget, Doug Chapman is also on that staff. Bartram's on that staff. Bill Legg is on that staff. They know. They've been there. Some of them have played in it, right?
Yep.
So they know. So all of these first-year guys that don't fully grasp it yet, they can rely on guys like Bill Legg, Cramsey, Chapman, Bartram to help navigate the waters this week and help drive some of those points home. And believe you me, they will be driven home. All that being said, Trace, who's your 200-proof player this week, 75 week for the Herd?
I'm going with Grant Wells. I mean, it's time, man. It is time. It is time for him to do it. It's got to be done. I mean, whether it's this game, whether it's Charlotte, whether it's Western Kentucky, or all three, it's time for him to show up. And I don't mean just show up. I mean show up with no interceptions, go out there, just light it up. I mean, he needs a game like that. And this would be a great time to have it. I mean, 75 week, UAB, tough opponent, big atmosphere, environment, emotions going crazy all over the place. This is the game to do it. He has to show up in this game. He can't. If Marshall, we saw last year how Marshall did against UAB when Grant Wells didn't show up for essentially the entirety of the game. They didn't win. So he's got to show up. He's got to have a game where he's not throwing an interception or two. It's got to be now. Marshall, I don't know how many, 3, 4, 5 times over the last couple of years on this podcast, I've said every time Marshall's won an FBS conference title, the quarterback's never been lower than second in the conference in passer rating. I don't know where Grant Wells is right now. I don't know, but he has to raise it to a different level if they want to win a title. So it's got to start here. So I'm going with Grant Wells.
Well, I'd like to point out that last year during 75 week, Marshall played Middle Tennessee State. And Grant Wells had a signature performance.
He did.
If you will recall, 25 of 37 for 336 yards, 5 touchdowns, 0 interceptions.
Need that again.
And Marshall rolled 42-14 against Middle Tennessee State. Now, UAB is not Middle Tennessee, okay?
No.
But Grant Wells has shown that he will show up in 75 weeks. And he knows that was basically his, I don't know what you call it, because he that was the height, and then after that it was straight downhill. Rice, the 5 interception game. Then you have UAB in the conference title game. You don't throw a reception, or you don't have a completion in the first half, and then you have a bowl game that just was ho-hum. But 75 week was huge for Wells. Now we were looking at a 336-yard game last year, thinking, "Wow, this is really impressive." And now he's doing that week in and week out. So if you can just eliminate that interception, put another goose egg in the interception column, and show up again in a big way, you don't have to have 5 touchdowns, but if you have 2 or 3 and no picks,
yep.
That will do it. That will be a difference. My pick, of course, is going to be Rasheen Ali, because I think this is ultimately going to turn into a battle of running backs. I think it's going to be Dwayne McBride versus Rasheen Ali, and I like the nation's touchdown leader in that battle. Ali has just as many yards as McBride has, and a quarter of them didn't come last game.
Yeah.
I'm not taking anything away from McBride, but Louisiana Tech is like a 2 or 3 win ball club. Marshall is not. There's a lot more on the line for the Herd in this game other than staying atop the Conference USA East. This is a game, to his credit, what we always used to say about Doc Holliday about this game is that he got it. He understood it. And Marshall, he always had Marshall ready to play this game. You hear my dog back here snoring again?
I do.
But he always had Marshall ready to play for 75 weeks, always. So this is a big indicator for Charles Huff as well. He's done some great things, but this is a game that absolutely your team has to come up and show up 100% prepared for. You cannot come out and stink it up or get the doors blown off in this one. That will not go over well. But what's your score prediction this week, Trace?
Yeah, I picked Marshall 27, UAB 20. I think it's going to be a relatively close game. I'd like to see Marshall continue what they've done in the last few games where they've been beating people pretty handily. I'd like to see that, but I think UAB is tougher than that. They have a formula that has worked against Marshall. It worked last year, and Marshall has struggled against said formula this year against several teams. Getting gashed, whatever. So UAB is good at that. They're good at running the football, and they're just good at being physical and tough and whatever. So I think this is a game where you're going to have to be the most physical, the toughest football team on the field. And, I think the fact that Marshall's going to be playing for the 75 and, all that, I think that's going to put them over the top. I think that's going to be the edge that they need to get over this hump and win the game. So I think Marshall will win a close one. I'm going to say 27-20.
Yeah, my heart would like to say Marshall 75-0.
Right.
But my brain says it's going to be much, much closer. In fact, I like it to be a closer game than you have it. Give me the Herd 33-31, and they're going to have to close it out. I mean, they're going to have to close it out. I'm talking about a 5-minute drive to run out the clock potentially to close this one out. And that's where guys like Rasheen Ali, Will Ulmer, Seguero, Millette, guys like that really come up huge, right? You're talking about being physical. Marshall kind of is built to do that. They can out-physical you if that's the game you want to play. They haven't had to yet, but they can. Ali runs very hard and very angry, and he does run to cause some pain. He's not going to try to run around you. He is willing to run through you. And, we know from years of watching guys along this offensive line that they love to push people around too. And they will be more than happy to plant you into the ground every single time the ball is snapped. And this has just got the feeling of one of those kind of games. Trace, final thoughts as we close out this week and get ready for UAB on 75 week.
Yeah, we've talked all this season about how November is going to be the month that really tells whether or not Marshall's for real or not. Well, they got started off on the right foot. A very impressive win on the road at FAU, another conference contender, very good performance. Now it's got to continue, and now the circumstances and the level of, importance is even higher because you got UAB coming into town. You got revenge from the 2020 conference title game on your mind. And then the most important thing of all is it's a 75 week. You're playing for the memory of all the victims of the crash in 1970. Everybody knows what that means for Marshall and how they play on that particular date. And there's always a lot of different storylines heading into 75 week, and this year's no exception. Both teams really need a win. UAB's second place right now, so they can't afford to really lose anymore. And Marshall, they're tied for first, so they're far from out of the woods yet either. So there's a lot of stuff involved in this game that is going to have to come to a head in this one. And Marshall's got a lot to play for. They have a whole lot to play for. This is going to be a big, like you said, this is a big game for Huff because Doc always got it done on 75 week, and he really helped spearhead that whole 75 week in the first place. So that was one of the biggest lasting things that Doc did was the emphasis on 75 week, and now Huff has to pick it right back up, and he's got to do it. So this is a tough start, because usually a 75 week they usually end up getting a relatively weaker opponent, it seems like, but this week they're not a weak opponent. So it's a big test, lot riding on this game. So hopefully they can come out and keep playing like they've been playing.
Well, last year you're right. They drew Middle Tennessee State, but if you remember 2 years ago, they got Louisiana Tech, and Louisiana Tech was riding high in the West. They were a big team. They come in, and they were without some players, and they still got beat pretty handily. Weird plays were happening in that, and that's where I recall that bad snap on a punt that set Marshall up to win a game. And you're like, really? This is one of those wild plays. But look, one note that we haven't talked about at all, is after this game, UAB has to go play UTSA. So I'm not saying they're looking past Marshall. They are not looking past Marshall at all.
No.
But UTSA looms, right? If that's got to be something that you're happy about if you're Marshall, knowing that UAB really has to have that game over UTSA in case UTSA trips up somewhere and they need a tiebreaker. That's the one you really have to have. So if they can creep up on them and catch them sleeping just a little bit, even if it's for a couple of minutes to start the game, great. I love everything that surrounds this week for the Herd. They do it pretty good. They everything is just so eloquently respectful and awesome at the same time. They do a really, really good job from the fountain ceremonies to the walking out arm in arm. Some things that I hope are going to survive through the coaching transition. Some things I hope that will remain. Last thing I want to talk about is I can't say over or under. Well, yeah, let's say over. Over under 50% chance that Marshall rolls out with black helmets to start the game.
My gut's
telling. This is a new athletic director. This is a new head coach.
Oh, I
and
know.
You have had maybe a tongue-in-cheek leak that it could happen.
They're a much hipper coaching staff that knows about this kind of stuff, but my gut's telling me under 50, but my heart's telling me over 50.
It sure would be cool if it happens, that's for sure. But I'll believe it when I see it. Yep. It would be awesome, though. Heard by a million if they do roll out. The plate, the roof will blow off of that place if they come out.
Oh, it would.
It'll be awesome. And they can in turn turn around and sell those for about $1,000 a piece, and people would line up to buy them.
They sure would.
All right. Well, Trace, let's get the heck out of here. You can take us out. We got to go this week. Stephen and I will try to link up and get an episode into where we relive the 100 miles of hate where Western Kentucky absolutely beat the brakes off of Middle Tennessee. And we'll look forward to now the Toppers having to play. God, I don't even know who's on their schedule next. I didn't even look, but they do have FAU coming. That might be in 2 weeks. But anyway, Stephen and I will try to get you an episode coming up. Trace, take us out.
Go Herds.
Go Tops. It's the Moonshine Throwdown podcast. Last thing, shout out to Go Herds lady. It was FAU week and you didn't show up in the stands. A little disappointed about that.
Oh, man.
It's the Moonshine Throwdown podcast. Later.